It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller.
One bias I have is that I have always felt, even when I disagreed with a candidate, I've always felt that there's honorable people would seek the presidency, and seeking the presidency is a very honorable thing to do in this country. And it's brought out some of the best. And I think Trump was a big change from what people have come to expect in the past. But we've gotten to a place where, and even Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said, it used to be hard work to run for president. Now you can sit at home and podcast. Well, that's not a very encouraging thing. But a couple of basics. One, if this fellow was named Samuel F. Jones Jr., we wouldn't be talking about it. I mean, and it's only his name and his eccentricity that creates the news around him. The second thing is, if the public was more supportive generally of the front runners, and they're not, you wouldn't have this sort of search for another candidate. And Robert F. Kennedy offers himself up on the Democratic side. No labels, whatever that is, that's another topic, but whatever that is say maybe we need a independent third party type of candidate. That has gaining some traction. In at least my view, both of these are dangerous.
What really troubles me is America faces the most serious threat to our democratic system in 2024 that we have had since the Civil War. As events are unfolding this week, it is very clear that Donald Trump is a mafia boss, essentially. He is a great threat to democracy. His administration and his activities are the greatest scandal in American presidential history, and nobody seems to be caring about it. It's just stunning. If Donald Trump, he has laid out a blueprint for ending American democracy. And what happens when he's about to be charged for leading an insurrection against the United States of America for essentially a treasonous act? The Speaker of the House defends him. None of his Republican candidates will say a damn word about it. It is just frightening. Yeah. And what happens, you have third-party candidates. We know from past political history, the last two elections, this is going to be a tight race. And what it ought to be is an up and down vote on democracy. Biden may not be the perfect vehicle, but he is the pro-democratic side of this. So everybody in America, whether you're a Republican, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're an independent, you ought to get out there and vote for democracy. So what do we have? We have groups like No Labels that want to split the anti-Biden vote, who can't win as a third party, who put out absolute pablum as their agenda. I've gone through this exercise of putting together a new agenda for a party. You got to stand for something. You read those 72 pages of No Labels and you don't see a damn thing that is even worthy of discussion. Yeah. They're for abortion except when they're against it. They're for gun control, but they want the Second Amendment to be inviolable. Cornel West, I've watched him on television. He's very entertaining. He's probably a great professor. Over his lifetime, he stood for a lot of good causes, but he's Looney Tunes as a president. And he could get enough votes to throw this election to Donald Trump. We don't know who's behind No Labels because they won't tell us, but it's pretty clear there is a lot of dark Republican money behind them. And all of that threatens our democracy. So to me, that's the issue in 2024, and we got to deal with it.
Joe Manchin has toyed with this idea. I think he's felt serious loss in terms of his ability to be that last vote they needed to capture to move something through the Senate, and now he's found something else that will put him into headlines. I honestly would be a little surprised to see Manchin really follow through with this, but I think he's intrigued with the idea. I'll come back to that, but I agree. Al's passion about this is right where we should be. We should be very concerned. I think it's interesting to me that the country is reeling from the fact that one president had 3 Supreme Court nominees. And it reminded everybody how important it is. Elections have consequences, how important it is who we elect, who has the power to appoint a Supreme Court justice. Guess what? The next president is probably going to have that. The next president will have if it's Biden or somebody else, the next president has the ability to appoint the top 200 people who run the departments and agencies of this government, and another 2,000 who literally every single day make a difference in the lives of some people, whether it's Homeland Security or the Defense Department or our intelligence community, the Justice Department. People are upset with the FBI about things and upset with the Justice Department. Well, it's the president that appoints the Attorney General of the United States. So it's our government is so much about people, but it's led by the person at the top. And we're getting attracted to people who would never be put at the top of any organization in this country, given the way they conduct themselves. It's also confusing as to why thoughtful people would say, let's take advantage of the fact that there's so much dissatisfaction between the candidates of the two major parties. Let's see if we can somehow cultivate this third group. It hasn't worked. It won't work to actually elect somebody. It is likely to be the only path that makes it possible for Donald Trump to win again, which I personally just find abhorrent. So that's why I have concerns about this no labels group. And to Al's point, and to the point I was making about we should care about the kind of people a leader brings to government, the kind of policies he or she believes in. No labels is on both sides of all the major issues, so you couldn't possibly know. And I guess his potential running mate, who was also in New Hampshire, Ambassador Huntsman, says when asked how this would work, he says, "We don't know. We've never tried it." That's an answer. It's the most ill-conceived idea that has come around in a long time. And in the view of a lot of us, it's a dangerous idea. Not because we feel we're going to be necessarily advantaged or disadvantaged, but because we feel we're going to get a very bad outcome. And it really, if I could wave a wand, I would say to the leadership of both parties, tell your front runners to step down, step back, let people rise into these positions who have the capacity to lead and the vision for a country that is formed by somebody with a life experience that's 40 or 50 years old and is ready to take on these challenges. I don't think anyone's going to give you that power, but I do think we're in a desperate situation.
To quote Lloyd Benson, Joe Manchin is a friend of mine, but Joe Manchin is no president of the United States. I've known Joe Manchin a long time. I'm sure he loves this attention. He's at the end of his political career. Probably will. He's got to decide whether to run for re-election in West Virginia, where he's running 30 or 40 points behind because the state's changed so much in the last 15 years. But and maybe that's why he's thinking about running for president. But look, he's not going to be elected president. And the no labels effort, run by people, incidentally, who I know well, because almost all the real leaders of no labels worked for me at one time or another, it is ill-conceived. Their candidate could be Joe Manchin. Larry Hogan looks like he's running hard to be their candidate. And maybe Huntsman made a try and he didn't get very far, so maybe they wouldn't go with him. But even Larry Hogan, who I've always thought was a reasonable governor here, I think he's stepping on dangerous grounds and he can't win as a third party. But even if it's a Republican on top of their ticket, because of the nature of the support for Trump and Biden, it will help Trump. And that's a key point. I just want to make one other point about what's going on in these efforts. They're very people in no labels in particular complains how closed these presidential nominating party or processes are in the parties. And so they need choices. They may be closed, but in the Democratic primaries in 2020, 37 million people participated, expressed their opinions. They nominated Joe Biden. In 2016, the last contested Republican contest, 31 million voters participated in nominating Donald Trump. That's not a closed process. And they say, well, you can't get an insurgent candidate in. That's nonsense. 5 of the last 8 presidents have been insurgencies. Jimmy Carter was not a Washington insider. Most of them didn't know him, and those that did wouldn't support him. Ronald Reagan challenged a sitting president before he became president. That's not an insider. Bill Clinton, when we formed the Democratic Leadership Council, most Democrats said we weren't real Democrats. Certainly, Barack Obama wasn't the inside choice. Hillary Clinton was. And Donald Trump was not the first choice of Republican regulars in 2016. So the way insurgent candidates work is they get into their party primaries and they win. They offer the voters something.
Yeah.
Low Labors is going to have a few people, probably dark money funders and a couple of often disgruntled political insiders pick the nominee in some phony convention. That's not democratic. And for those who say it's hard to have insurgencies, I will just tell you, I was part of one, okay? When we formed the Democratic Leadership Council, we were viewed as outsiders. But what did we do? We put together an agenda that had real cut, ideas that now mostly are the law of the land. We had a candidate emerge from that, Bill Clinton. But we didn't just anoint him and say, run in a general election. We said, you got to put it to the market test. You got to go into the primaries. And so he went into the 1992 primaries and he won. And that's how we enacted our program. This week, No Labels released its Pablum program. They think that's a winning program. Let Larry Hogan take it into the Republican primaries and Joe Manchin take it into the Democratic primaries and see how many votes it gets. Look, bottom line, democracy is on the line in 2024. Trump is the greatest threat to democracy this country has seen since the Civil War. He has to be stopped. And any effort that helps him to back to the presidency is one that needs to cease and desist.
We have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller.